So, welcome to the Solopreneur Tech Stack, what you need and what you don't. The answer to this is going to be a little bit different for everybody. It really depends on your business, how you operate, and what types of tools you're paying for. And those are all different things we're going to explore in this session. If you're not familiar with me, my name is Anna Burgess Yang. I am a solopreneur operations expert, which means I talk all the time about tools, automation, AI, and everything that happens behind the scenes of a solo business. I am also a freelance content marketer and journalist. I write directly for clients, a lot of B2B SaaS companies, and also some publications. In a prior life, more than 5 years ago at this point, I was a tech executive. I worked at a financial technology company for 15 years, and I was a product manager. So part of that role was choosing tools. I was very tool forward even at that time, and would often research different tools, make recommendations for different departments, and had to factor in who's using this, what do they need it for, and how much is it going to cost. So when I started my solo business, I had to do a lot of the same things, except it's just me and it's my budget. It's my money every month. And in talking to solopreneurs over the years, a lot of them just aren't sure. They don't know how much they should be paying. They don't know what's worth it, what's not worth it, and what things should or should you not be doing manually. And those are the types of things I'm going to cover. In this session, we're going to talk about what's that actual cost of tools, because it's not just the price that you pay every month. There's setup, there's the time involved, there's time spent if you don't have a tool. Looking at free versus paid options of the different tools out there and what makes the most sense for your business. A 5-question audit framework. And these are the things that I go through both when I am looking at bringing on a new tool and if I'm looking at whether or not to make a change or maybe renew a tool or drop it. There's different ways you can look at those. How to keep track. Because I am in the 16 plus category of how many tools I pay for, it's important to keep track of them. And when to switch versus when to stay. This is a real big one, especially because there's no shortage of tools on the market for most types of tools. Project management, accounting, calendar scheduling, all of those things. There are so many. And a new tool might come on the market, or maybe an existing tool now offers a new option that looks really attractive to you. Is it actually worth switching from whatever you're doing currently? And at the end, we're going to have some time for a Q&A. So first, we're going to talk about the real cost of tools. One thing that I think is really important to understand as a solopreneur is what is tool bloat. And basically, that means you're paying for things that you don't need. It either isn't really serving its purpose or you've got too many. And that ends up costing your business in a very real way. You are paying for that thing every month. And that is always something solopreneurs have to keep in mind is the hard costs of their tools. There's also a risk that you have subscriptions that you forget about. You signed up and maybe you even signed up for an annual subscription and then you just forget and then it renews and then it's too late. Many companies are notorious for not giving you any warning before you renew, especially on annual plans. They want to just get that revenue. Some companies will. They'll let you know. They'll say, hey, you're up for renewal in 3 days, 7 days. Now is your opportunity. And that's great. If they do that, it gives you a chance to think about it. But very often that's not the case. And so you do need to keep track of renewal dates and costs. And that's another thing we're going to talk about. But also the inverse of that is time that you may spend on a workaround if you don't have a tool. So a really good example of this is I know some solopreneurs may keep track of their expenses in just an Excel spreadsheet, for example. They just log them there, and then they use that spreadsheet when it comes time to file their taxes. That works, especially if you don't have a ton of outgoing money every month. But if you have a lot of expenses or a lot of income to keep track of, an accounting tool is better because the amount of time and the fact that it's connected directly to your bank and your credit card, that saves you so much time and it's more accurate. And when you get to tax time, you're not scrambling to gather everything. So that's what I mean by time spent on a workaround. You can do it manually. It is totally possible. But is that the best use of your time? And is there another cost, which might be inaccuracies, delays, or even client experience that is more difficult for your client? So when should you consider a free tool versus a paid option? And some tools I use are free. Um, Free is enough when you can do everything you need to do without question. A really good example of this is Trello. Trello has an amazing free plan. Airtable has an amazing free plan. Lots of tools. Calendly, like if you just need one link, the free plan is fine. And you're not doing workarounds just to make the free work for you. You're not constantly hitting, hey, this feature is behind a paywall, or hey, you need to upgrade, or things like that. Then free is fine. But if you have reached that point when you are doing too many things to work around the free, now you need to calculate what your time is worth. So if you're moving from free to paid $10 a month, $20 a month, how much time is that actually saving you? And is it worth that cost? Another one is what I call shiny new object syndrome. I am very guilty of this. I hear about something new, like a completely different tool, something I'm not doing currently. I want to check it out. I like playing with tools. I like seeing if they are worth it. But that by itself is a cost in looking at something that may not even be worth my time at all. And so a lot of times people just sign up because it seems like, oh, I might use this someday. And then it's not enough to get you to change something in your current process. And now you've reached more tool bloat because now you're paying for something that you thought you were going to use and you're not actually using it. What I suggest when you're looking at free to paid is a lot of companies will offer a free trial. And I think a lot of times that's not enough. The 7-day free trial, 14-day free trial, that is not enough to actually evaluate a tool. I would pay for 1 month. Really dig in and make sure that you can get past that evaluation period and keep using that tool. And then you could commit. If you make it through and you're like, yep, I'm using this the way I thought I was going to use it. Now you could commit to maybe an annual plan for lower costs. Many, many tools offer 15% off, 20% off if you commit to annual, but you've got to make sure that it's worth it. Most of my tools are annual. There are a couple where I'm kind of always thinking that maybe I would drop that tool if something better came along. And in that case, I'm not willing to commit to annual because I want to opt out at any time. Or the annual doesn't save me any money. But you start with free. You can go to then free or free trial. Make sure that you're actually going to use it before you commit to an annual plan. So these are the 5 things that I think about when I am auditing, evaluating, looking at a tool or looking at a renewal. Very first and foremost, is this tool worth the cost? Some just flat out aren't. I a lot of times like to look at what is the cost of the tool versus how much time does it save me. That is a real quick, if it costs $10 a month and saves me an hour of time, well, my time is worth more than $10 an hour, so it's worth it. And later in this, I'm going to show you a calculator and share that with you so that you can do a quick math on is that tool worth the cost. But you also have to think that as you add, 20 tools, in my case, is that cumulative cost worth it? Are you saving enough over all of those tools collectively? Another thing to ask yourself is what other options are on the market? This is so relevant now and it becomes more relevant because there are so many alternatives. You may hear of a tool, you may check it out, you may think, yeah, this is going to work for me, but what else is out there? You may not know. The next question to ask is, can this tool grow with me? So tools have different tiers, most of them. There's a free plan, there's maybe a solo plan, there's a growth plan, enterprise is for large companies. But basically, if your business were twice as complex as it is today, could you still use that tool or would you need to change? That can be hard to determine. But maybe if the tool only does one thing and maybe only has one paid plan, is that still going to work for you when you're doing double the capacity or twice as much work or working with other people? Maybe you need to hire a subcontractor or something like that. That's something you want to think about. And a lot of times companies will say, we're targeting a solo business person or we're targeting this type of business. And that can help signal to you whether that tool is going to still continue to work for you. Another thing to think about is an all-in-one tool versus best tool for the job. And what I mean by that is a lot of tools, especially things like project management tools or CRMs, they might offer the ability to collect, keep track of your sales pipeline and send a contract and manage communication and project manage all in a single tool. Or you pick a couple of different tools. And so then you maybe have one calendar scheduling and something separate for contracts and something separate for project management. And then you're able to pick the tool that does the exact thing you need it to do versus an all-in-one maybe does most things you need, but not everything exactly. But you're willing to do that in order to only deal with one tool. I prefer best tool with the job for the job, but I am also really good at Zapier, which connects things in the background. And so I'm not copying and pasting information from different tools. And so that keeps my systems connected, even though I'm using different tools. But for you, if that's not something you're interested in, or you would rather just have everything in one place, then you want to consider an all-in-one. And those cost more because they do more, but then you're only paying for and managing one tool. And finally, this is more when you're looking at a renewal, of a tool, maybe it's annual. Does it still meet your needs? Has your business changed? Has the tool changed? Sometimes tools like move up market and they're not targeting solo people anymore. They're targeting bigger companies and they just don't make sense anymore with the features they're adding. And so that is a time when that's not the right tool for you anymore. So next, I'm going to talk about keeping track of tools. And for me, this is an interesting one because I have so many. I do need to keep track. I would recommend somewhere, no matter where you're at. If you've only got 5, make a list. Just put it in a spreadsheet, put it in Notion, Airtable, somewhere. List the tools that you're paying for and free. Free tools, same thing. How much it's costing you each month, whether it's 0 or $10 or $20, and when it renews. If it renews monthly, if it renews annually, things like that. Then I just mentioned that cost and renewal dates. So keeping track. And also, one thing I really recommend, especially if you have a lot like me or you get more, are what are your critical tools versus your non-critical tools. A critical tool means you need it to run your business, like your project management tool with your client, your email. Like for me, Google Workspace is critical. That is how I work with my clients. That's where everything is stored in my Google Drive, and it's my email. My web hosting is critical. I've got to have that. Non-critical would be if you were in a pinch and maybe had a slowdown in your business. It's a nice to have, and you are willing to pay for it, but it's not essential. Last year, I had surgery and had to take a few months off from work, and during that time had income of $0. Before I had the surgery, I looked at my tools and thought, what can I safely pause of the monthly? What can I safely pause for a few months and not pay for? It's not going to hurt my business. I still had to pay for Google Workspace. I still had to pay for accounting software. Those things didn't stop just because I wasn't working, but other things did. I could just, I didn't use Zoom for those months. And so I was able to just pause that type of tool. Here's a little screenshot of what Airtable, which is where I keep track. It's not all of my tools. At the end of this session, I am going to share. You can look. I've got it published online. All of the tools. I think at the time when I wrote it, 25 tools and what I use them for. If you're curious, but basically, I can mark the tool active, and so it does have my inactive tools as well. The term, is it annual, is it monthly, what I'm using it for, and what's the cost. When to switch versus when to stay. As somebody who changes tools on a semi-regular basis, I have a lot of experience with this one. The main thing is the tool is no longer working for you. You're using something, you're struggling with it. Maybe it has a lot of issues. You can't stand their customer support. That is a big one. You may start with a tool, but it has problems. And every time you reach out, it's an AI bot or a non-helpful person, and you just can't get any help. That means it's not working. You need to do something else. I have left tools and companies before due to terrible customer support because there are plenty of options out there. Another one is overlap. Sometimes maybe you were paying for two different things, but now one of them offers the other thing you were paying for. And so now you can combine basically and consolidate, and you don't need to pay for two. And so you've got this overlap, and that's always worth exploring. Tools constantly release new features and may make something else obsolete for you. But you have to consider the cost of switching. And I'm not talking about the actual cost, because you might be trading one $20 tool for another $20 tool, but the time. And how are you going to move your data? Like, some might have an export and import feature. Maybe you just manually put it in. Maybe you just say goodbye to whatever you had before. Maybe it's not an issue. Switching like a calendar scheduling tool, you just basically leave the old one and the new one. But you have to think about what the downstream impact is and how much time it's going to cost you to set up the new tool. Any new tool is going to have some type of configuration that you have to figure out. So that you have to think about that when you do a switch. Another thing that comes up a lot, especially with AI, is a price increase without a new feature or with new features that you're not going to use. I've had several tools this year raise their prices citing AI. Sometimes I use the AI, but sometimes I don't. And when I don't use the AI, or it's not interesting to me, then I'm a bit resentful of having to pay for features I don't use. I prefer tools that have AI as a separate add-on, and so I can opt in or opt out. or they just raise their prices for no, oh, our costs have gone up and we're willing to. You might think it's worth it, but if it's not a tool you use, you may say this is not no even though this was worth it at the time, it's no longer worth it. I use AI for research. I was recently thinking of the note-taking tool I use, and so I chatted with Claude and said, "This is what I need. I need this. I need this. I need this. I need this." And Claude did research for me and said, "This is the exact comparison to what you're using now and other options on the market." And then I could go look at that company's page and read more on my own, but it was a good starting point for me. So I highly recommend that because um, sometimes it's come up with tools that I may not have found on my own otherwise or hadn't heard of, but they were worth looking into. And it's a lot more personalized than just generically searching, project management tools in Google and ending up with companies that have good search engine optimization versus companies that may actually meet what you need. I'm going to share with you my tool assessment calculator, and I created this. And so it's just a web page. You type in the cost of the tool, how much time it's going to save you per month and your monthly income, how many hours you work per week. It'll calculate your approximate month hourly rate and tell you, is this tool worth it? And also, you can optionally put in how much you're paying for all of your tools together. And then it'll look at maybe overall, are you paying too much? Sometimes I come across a new tool that I really want, but I just don't want to pay more for tools in general. And then I'll look at maybe my non-critical tools and say, is there something I could cut? Is there, I really want this new one. I don't want to pay more overall. What could I maybe isn't worth it anymore? And so then I'll just cancel or not renew. The tool assessment calculator is one of them. That is everything that I wanted to cover in this session. Thank you so much for coming. You can check out written versions of the tutorials I create on my website, tinkeringwithideas.io. I also have a ton of free resources on Gumroad. I've got guides, worksheets, e-courses. You can check them all out at products.annabeyang.com.